Keeping a Honda on the road is usually an easy task, that is until you have a major failure. And usually the things that fail on a Honda the most are the transmission. Now this can happen due to several different factors. The most common being is that Honda motors last a very long time, and they can wear down a transmission from all the driving that they can perform. So today I'm going to go over how you keep your Honda on the road with a good transmission in it, what steps you can take to make sure your transmission lasts as long as your motor, and what you can do when your transmission finally does fail, and what options do you have. In this video, we're working on a 2006 Honda Odyssey, and there might also be some clips from a 2009 Acura TSX. I'll be using both these cars to give you examples of how you can fix a Honda transmission two different ways. In a previous video, I took this 2006 Honda Odyssey transmission out and rebuilt it completely, and I did a really in-depth video on how you rebuild a Honda transmission. If you want to go check that out, I have the link in the description below. Now, I'll warn you, rebuilding a Honda transmission isn't as easy as it sounds or I make it look. They are very unique, they have a lot of moving parts, and they are very touchy. They have to be put back exactly right or they will not work. With that being said, whenever I get a Honda in that needs a transmission, I immediately go look for a good used swap, because that's usually the easiest way to keep your Honda driving down the road. Now, it's not always a guarantee you'll find a good used unit for your exact Honda model, and if you have an Accord or an Odyssey or a Pilot, you're pretty much out of luck as far as finding a good used one, because they've probably all been bought up as soon as they become available. Now, when I bought this Acura TSX from a customer, I went online and I was actually able to find several good used units under 100,000 miles, and I actually selected one that had only 80,000 miles on it, was 30 minutes away from my shop, and only cost $400. It even came with a 6-month warranty. Now this is a heck of a deal, and I don't expect to find it again, and that's why I always take a look online before I start cracking these transmissions open and try to rebuild them. If you can find a deal as sweet as I can, I definitely recommend going that route and just swapping it in. Now swapping it in isn't that easy, but it is much easier than taking it out, rebuilding it, and trying to put it back in yourself. Now as for this Odyssey and a Pilot that I fixed over a year ago, I could not find any good used ones available, so I had to rebuild them. Now whether you're going to swap it out or have it rebuilt, you're going to need a lift to probably remove a Honda transmission, because you got to remove the bottom subframe. I do not recommend doing this on the ground. It will take you probably 3 times as long to get it done. Now even with a lift, removing a Honda transmission is no easy task, especially if you have an all-wheel drive Pilot or CR-V. Now usually Hondas only have one upper mount on the motor and no upper mounts on the transmission side. That means the transmission is supported by the subframe, and when you remove the subframe, you're going to have something to support the engine and transmission together, or else it'll all fall out with the subframe. Now there are several videos on YouTube showing people removing these transmissions out the top, which could make it easier for your DIYer, but it's definitely going to take longer than the method I'm showing you here on a lift. Now once you have it out, you got to come up with a game plan to get this thing back together and get it on the road, and that's what we're going to be talking about mostly today. But first, I need you to hit that subscribe button for me and comment in the comment section below. Let me know if you have a Honda transmission problem, and you can also email me at justcallmeeddie1@gmail.com, and I'll help you out with your problem as much as I can. Now first, what can you do to prevent your Honda transmission from failing if it hasn't already? Well, the main thing that I recommend doing is changing your fluid every 30,000 miles, and you can also put some additives inside your fluid to help them last a little bit longer. The one I recommend the most is a Lube Guard Platinum, and you can find this online if you just Google it. Changing your transmission fluid is forgotten about too often, and this is the main reason why Honda transmissions fail, is they just never have their fluid changed. Doing this simple step will help keep your Honda on the road much longer. The other thing you can do is be nice to your car. If you're nice to your car, it'll be nice to you, and that means do not beat on it, do not rev it up, do not be driving down highways at 3 in the morning with loud exhaust popping and back crackling like typical Honda owners do. If you're one of those guys, you need to go find you a Civic Si with a 6-speed manual that is built for that type of performance. If not, and you have an automatic, you're going to be spending a lot of time underneath the hood fixing that transmission and other problems that you're causing. For the average driver, you just need to make sure you have the right transmission fluid in your vehicle and an adequate amount, and that it's good stuff in there. To check your transmission fluid on a Honda, there's usually a dipstick, and you have to check a Honda transmission when the car is off. So you want to get it to a nice operating temperature, shut the car off, and then check your transmission fluid, and you want to check it several times to make sure that the level is correct. Now, another thing that I hear a lot on the internet is what type of fluid do you put in a Honda? And a lot of people say that you need to put the Honda Genuine transmission fluid in it, and that is not always correct. Unless you have a CVT transmission in your Honda or a manual transmission, you should be able to use traditional automatic transmission fluid like a Mercon 5 or a Deck 6, but I always put a LubeGuard Platinum additive in these just to be sure. Another method to check you're putting the right fluid in your Honda transmission is to call the dealership with your VIN, ask them what fluid that you may need for your Honda transmission, and then Google and see if you can find any compatible fluids. Usually companies like Valvoline or Pennzoil have listed compatible fluids on the back of their transmission fluid bottles, and they'll tell you what fluids that they will work with in what cars. Now, if you already have transmission issues like slipping or shifting issues, your transmission is probably too far gone for a fluid change to do anything. Now, when you have a problem with your car's transmission, there's usually three options to fix it. One is going a good use route, which is what we talked about that I did on the Acura TSX. The other is rebuilding the transmission, which is what I did on the Honda Odyssey. And the third and most expensive is buying a remanufactured transmission from a remanufactured facility that rebuilds transmissions on the daily. Now, this third option is not something that I generally pick on Hondas because it can be very, very expensive. Buying a remanufactured transmission for a Honda can go upwards of $4,000, and that does not include the cost of labor to install the transmission. Now, in newer Hondas, this is pretty much the only option because not many people are rebuilding these newer Honda transmissions because there's not a lot of information out with them, and the good used market is slim pickings. But on older Hondas like 2012 and older, you can usually have all three options of a rebuilt, remanufactured, or a good used transmission swap. Now, as I said earlier in the video, good used is usually the easiest and most cost-effective way to fix your Honda transmission. Now, rebuilding it is the second most cost-effective way to fix your Honda transmission, but it is the hardest way to go about it. You can expect to be without your car for weeks, and it's going to cost upwards of $4,000 to $5,000 just to take it out, rebuild it, and put it back in the car. Now, with the price of used vehicles being ridiculously high nowadays, that is pretty reasonable to keep your Honda on the road, especially if you know the motor's good and the rest of the vehicle has been well taken care of. Now, there is one limiting factor on rebuilding your Honda transmission, and that is if it can actually be rebuilt. Not all transmissions are able to be rebuilt and be put back in the car and work perfectly fine. Sometimes the damage is too much to actually fix by rebuilding it. In that case, you might be able to find a high mileage good used one, rebuild that one, put it in your car, or you could go with the remanufactured route or just find a good used one with low mileage. In my case with the Honda Odyssey, this transmission was driving good for about 30 minutes, and then once it got hot, it started neutraling out and losing gear and would leave you sitting on the side of the road. What was happening was there was debris inside the transmission from clutches coming apart, and it was clogging up the filter once it got hot. Since this transmission was shifting fine and driving good for 30 minutes, it was able to be rebuilt. But if this transmission had hard shifts or was not shifting at all, I could not guarantee that it would work exactly right once I got it back together, and in that case, I would probably not rebuild that transmission. Now, the Acura TSX was a different story. This transmission had been rebuilt before by somebody else and was missing fifth gear. And since somebody had been inside this transmission before, it was not something I was looking forward to try to go back behind and fix their mistakes. For that reason, we opted to go with a good used transmission, and not to mention we found a really cheap, low mileage unit out of a junkyard, which made it an easier decision. Now, buying a transmission from a junkyard isn't always peaches and roses because usually you only get a 30 to 90 day warranty that gives you 1 month of coverage on this transmission that you just spent hundreds of dollars on. It's not ideal, but when you consider that Hondas are very well engineered, and if you take care of them, they'll take care of you, you should be okay with a low mileage, good used transmission. Because if it doesn't work, you're usually going to know within the first couple of road tests. Now, a rebuilt warranty usually comes with about a year to 2 year warranty. Most of the time it's 12 months, 12,000 miles, or 18 month, 18,000 miles. And then with a remanufactured unit, your warranty is usually the best because it's the most expensive price, and you usually get 3 years, 36,000 miles, and some warranties even offer up to 100,000 miles of coverage. Now, if you've watched this video all the way through, I'm going to go ahead and take it that you have a Honda transmission problem, and I hope all this information that I've given you will help you out making a decision on what to do with your car. And if you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below or email me at justcallmeeddie1@gmail.com. If I helped you out with anything during this video, please subscribe to this channel because I will be posting more informational videos like this one. Until next time, whatever you do, however you do it, make sure you stay dirty, make sure you work hard, and most importantly, make sure you play hard. You can just call me Eddie.